Hello friends, today we are going to learn about the characteristics of virtualization with its diagram, examples, etc. Characteristics of virtualization. Characteristics of virtualization, what does it mean? Actually, virtualization is a technique, as we all are discussing in the previous classes, that virtualization is a technique how to separate a service from the underlying physical delivery of that service. It is the process of creating a virtual version of something like computer hardware. It was initially developed during the mainframe era, which we have discussed in the previous section. It involved using specialized software to create a virtual or software created version of a computing resource rather than the actual version of the same resource. With the help of virtualization, multiple operating systems and applications can run on the same machine and its same hardware at the same time, increasing the utilization and flexibility of hardware. Now, what does this mean? This means that with the help of virtualization, what we can do, we can create multiple operating system or multiple operating systems and applications can run on the same machine and having the same hardware resources, or we could say the same physical resources, increasing its utilization and the flexibility of the physical resource, or we can say the hardware which we are using. Another thing, in other words, one of the main cost effective, hardware reducing, energy saving techniques used by cloud providers is virtualization. So virtualization, what is the benefit of using virtualization, we could say, or why we use virtualization? It is because it is cost effective, it is hardware reducing, so that you do not have to maintain that particular physical resource, or you do not have to maintain a large amount of physical resources. Instead, with one we can create multiple virtual machines. Another thing is energy saving techniques. Thus, cloud providers used virtualization. Virtualization is a technique which allows to share a single physical instance of a resource or an application among multiple customers and organizations at one time. It does by assigning a logical name to a physical storage and providing a pointer to that physical resource on demand. The term virtualization is often synonymous with hardware virtualization, which plays a fundamental role in efficiently delivering infrastructure as a service solutions for cloud computing. Now, what does this mean? Here, we can say virtualization is synonymous with hardware virtualization. Why do we say virtualization is synonymous to hardware virtualization? Because it plays a fundamental role in efficiently delivering what? The services in of infrastructure as a service. Infrastructure as a service is basically the physical resources which is being provided to the cloud customers. Cloud providers or cloud computing uses virtualization because virtualization helps its infrastructure as a service to increase and play an important role and can be delivered or effectively delivered to the users. Moreover, virtualization technologies provide a virtual environment for not only executing applications but also for storage, memory, and networking. The machine on which the virtual machine is going to be built is known as host machine, and the virtual machine is referred as the guest machine. Characteristics of virtualization, we are coming to the topic. First thing is the increased security. Now, how the security, or why is this a characteristic of virtualization? It is because it provides the ability to control the execution of a guest program in a completely transparent manner, opens new possibilities for delivering a secure, controlled execution environment. While we are working on a virtual machine, it does not appears as if the user is not working or accessing the physical resources. Thus, it provides a transparent manner, and then it creates the possibilities that the user can access directly. Plus, when a user is accessing, for example, there is a machine, physical resource 1, and there are multiple virtual machines. Now, all these three users accessing the same physical resource, but the user 1 is not interacted with user 2, and user 2 is not interacted with either of the user, that is 1 or 3, and same with the user 3. Now, since all three of them are accessing the same physical resource, that is this one, but they will be accessing as if they are the only one who is accessing that particular physical resource, and also it delivers, that means the data is not, data of user 1, data of user 2 and data of user 3 are not mixed or not exchanged, any information is not transferred to any of the users. So your data is secure, it is in a controlled executed environment or execution environment, so it provides security for that particular data. This is your one characteristics of virtualization. Another thing, all the operations of the guest programs are generally performed against the virtual machine, which then translates and applies them to the host programs. A virtual machine manager can control and filter the activity of guest programs, thus preventing some harmful operations from being performed. What we understand with this statement is that we have this one particular physical resource and we have multiple users who are using this resource. Now, what with this thing? It is that this guest program, these are the guest machines, or you can say they are the users who are working on the guest machine with guest programs, or they are providing, or activity is done with the guest programs. Now, this host program, this is a host machine which we have. So this particular machine, it has the host programs in it. So now these host program prevents any of the guest machine to run any harmful guest program to affect the physical resource. This is also, that means it has some controls and filters which prevents any of the guest machines or the user to harm the particular physical resource, thus providing security to the data and the system. Now, resources exposed by the host can then be hidden or simply protected from the guest. Increased security is a requirement when dealing with the untrusted code. Example, an untrusted code can be analyzed in Cuckoo Sandbox's environment. How? The term sandbox identifies an isolated execution environment where instructions can be filtered and blocked before being translated and executed in the real execution environment. What does this mean? This means that sandbox, here this sandbox, it identifies the isolated execution program, that is which is not with any other program. Here, the term sandbox, it identifies an isolated execution environment, or you could say an execution isolated executed program which is not with any other, or which is not in sync with any other program or environment, and there and instructions or many instructions can be filtered and blocked. If they are not up to the mark or they are harmful to the host, then they can be blocked before being translated and executed in the real execution environment. Another example, the expression sandboxed version of the Java virtual machine refers to a particular configuration of the JVM where, by means of security policy, instructions that are considered potentially harmful can be blocked. So we can say that when we are working on any of the virtual machines, they have this sandboxed environment which filters the instructions, and if they are harmful to any of the program or the host machine, then they are blocked. Another is the managed execution. Now, what managed execution is? In particular, sharing, aggregation, emulation, and isolation are the most relevant features of the managed execution. Since the name managed execution, that means it is managed with the help of these features. We can see the diagram. See, it has virtual resources, then virtualization is being done, and the physical resources. See, physical resources, virtualization is being done, and then you get the virtual resources. Now, managed execution, so it has features like sharing, then emulation, isolation, aggregation, etc. So with the help of this, you are getting a complete virtualized environment. Sharing, the first feature of managed execution. What does it provide? Virtualization allows the creation of a separate computing environments within the same host. The basic feature is used to reduce the number of active servers and limit power consumption. Now, what does that mean? Virtualization, it allows the creation of a separate computing environment. What do we mean by separate computing environment? As we have been discussing it since the day one of virtualization, that it gives us a isolated environment of the same physical resource to multiple users. So this is like it gives the separate computing environments within the same host. We have discussed it. This basic feature is used to reduce the number of active servers. Why we use it? Because it reduces the number of active servers, and by doing that it limits the power consumption. Another one is aggregation. What does that mean? Not only it is possible to share physical resource among several guests, but virtualization also allows aggregation, which is the opposite process. Now, a group of separate hosts can be tied together and represent as a guest to a single virtual host. Now, what does we do in aggregation, or why it is used in managed execution? Now, what we have been discussing since day one is we share physical resource among several guests, but virtualization allows aggregation. Now, what is aggregation? Aggregation is just vice versa of the complete process which we have been following since now. So, a group of separate hosts, that means there are separate hosts which are tied together, and then there is a single virtual host. So, we represent several hosts, that is several separate hosts tied together as a single to the virtual guest or host. This functionality is implemented with cluster management software, which harnesses the physical resources of a homogeneous group of machines and represents them as a single resource. Next one is the emulation. What we mean by emulation is guest programs are executed within an environment that is controlled by the virtualization layer. which ultimately is a program. Also, a completely different environment with respect to the host can be emulated, thus allowing the execution of guest programs requiring specific characteristics that are not present in the physical host. Now, what do we mean by emulation here is, see, there are several guest programs. Now, these guest programs are executed within an environment that is controlled by virtualization layer. So, virtualization layer controls a particular environment in which these guest programs are executed. Now, these guest programs are ultimately a program. Also, there is a different, or we can say a completely different environment with respect to the host. That means the host do not have that environment that is completely different from that particular or existing environment, which can be emulated, thus allowing the execution of guest programs requiring specific characteristics. There are some programs which needs some specific characteristics in that environment. For that, we need this emulated or emulation technique. Next one is the isolation. Now, virtualization allows providing guests whether they are operating systems, applications, or other entities with a completely separate environment in which they are executed. The guest program performs its activity by interacting with an abstraction layer which provides access to the underlying resources. The virtual machine can filter the activity of the guest and prevent harmful operations against the host. Thus, virtualization provides isolation between guest machine and the host machine. Besides these characteristics, another important capability enabled by virtualization is performance tuning. What is performance tuning? This feature is reality at present. How? Given the considerable advances in hardware and software, it supports virtualization. It becomes easier to control the performance of the guest by finely tuning the properties of the resources exposed through the virtual environment. Now, what does that mean? That means when we are controlling, or you could say when a program is running, so to control its performance as per the requirement or the desire of the customer or consumer, the guest by finally tuning means tuning as per the requirement, tuning the properties of the resources which is exposed through that particular virtual environment. This capability provides a means to effectively implement a quality of service infrastructure. Portability. What portability means is the concept of portability applies in different ways according to the specific type of virtualization considered. In this case of a hardware virtualization solution, the guest is packaged into a virtual image that in most cases can be safely moved and executed on top of different virtual machines. Portability we have discussed before. In the case of programming level virtualization as implemented by JVM is Java Virtual Machine, or the .NET runtime, the binary code representing application components, say for example, JVMs have jars or assemblies, can run without any recompilation on any implementation of the corresponding virtual machines. Since they have those files, so they do not need its recompilation. Once compiled, can run on any of the virtual machine platforms. Virtualization plays a very important role in the cloud computing technology. How normally in the cloud computing, users share the data present in the clouds like applications, etc. But actually, with the help of virtualization, users share the infrastructure. The main usage of virtualization technology is to provide the applications with the standard versions to their cloud users. Suppose if the next version of that application is released, then cloud provider has to provide the latest version to their cloud users, and practically it is possible because it is more expensive. To overcome this problem, we use basically virtualization technology. Which problem we are overcoming with the help of virtualization? A quick rewind is that when we have a new version of any application or software, then buying that complete new version and reinstalling it is more expensive as compared to the updating a particular existing software or application. So virtualization, it overcomes this problem. By using virtualization, all servers and the software applications which are required by other cloud providers are maintained by third party people, and the cloud providers has to pay the money on monthly or annual basis. Mainly, virtualization means running multiple operating systems on a single machine but sharing all the hardware resources. And it helps us to provide the pool of IT resources so that we can share these IT resources in order to get benefits in the business. Thank you.